darkness, truths unravel. Welcome to Darkroom Narratives, where every story leaves a shadow. Some journeys don't end where they should. Tonight, on Darkroom Narratives, he took me deep into the Yukon, then tried to leave me for dead.
Adventures do, from a quiet conversation in a small town cafe nestled among the rugged landscapes of Utah. Mike and Jason had grown up together, their friendship forged through countless fishing trips, campfires, and shared memories under vast starlit skies. This expedition, however, was special. It was a long-held dream, exploring the wild Yukon, paddling remote rivers, and catching fish untouched by civilization. Mike, steady and reliable, had always been the leader. He was a born outdoorsman, with calm blue eyes that inspired confidence, a man whose laughter resonated warmly through any room. Jason was his opposite, quieter, more reserved, with a hidden intensity in his dark gaze, always contemplating something deep beneath the surface. But beneath Jason's quiet demeanor was a secret he had carried for years. He had silently fallen for Mike's wife, Laura, captivated by her spirit and grace, yet never daring to speak of his feelings. Each laugh she shared with Mike felt like a tiny blade twisting in Jason's heart. This trip, he decided, was his chance to finally change everything. The weeks of preparation passed quickly, and soon the day arrived. Mike waved goodbye to Laura at the door, her warm smile and wave etched in his memory. Jason watched quietly from the side, envy tightening his throat, his mind already darkening with dangerous plans. The two men loaded their gear into the truck and set off northwards, each lost in his own thoughts, unaware that this trip would alter the course of their lives forever. The Yukon unfolded before them like a vast, untamed dream. Endless forests blanketed hills and valleys. Rivers sparkled in the crisp air, carrying the whispers of untouched wilderness. Mike felt invigorated, his eyes bright with the anticipation of discovery and solitude. Jason paddled silently behind, his heart a conflicted mess. His mind replayed every shared moment with Laura, the stolen glances, the subtle ache that never ceased. Yet his plan, clear and cold as the Yukon waters beneath him, slowly took shape. As the river guided their kayaks deeper into isolation, nature seemed to close around them, wrapping the travelers in a mysterious embrace. By the second day, the outside world felt impossibly distant, and tensions began to stir subtly between them. Jason found himself resenting Mike's casual ease, his stories of Laura, his simple happiness that Jason believed should rightfully belong to him. That evening, as they set up camp on a quiet riverside clearing, Jason made a decision. He quietly opened a map, his finger tracing a perilous stretch of river downstream, an area marked with rapids and hidden dangers. A grim determination settled over him as he formulated his next move. The shadows of the Yukon watched silently, as though sensing the storm to come. The Yukon unfolded before them like a vast, untamed dream. Endless forests blanketed hills and valleys. Rivers sparkled in the crisp air, carrying the whispers of untouched wilderness. Mike felt invigorated, his eyes bright with the anticipation of discovery and solitude. Jason paddled silently behind, his heart a conflicted mess. His mind replayed every shared moment with Laura, the stolen glances, the subtle ache that never ceased. Yet his plan, clear and cold as the Yukon waters beneath him, slowly took shape. As the river guided their kayaks deeper into isolation, nature seemed to close around them, wrapping the travelers in a mysterious embrace. By the second day, the outside world felt impossibly distant, and tensions began to stir subtly between them. Jason found himself resenting Mike's casual ease, his stories of Laura, his simple happiness that Jason believed should rightfully belong to him. That evening, as they set up camp on a quiet riverside clearing, Jason made a decision. He quietly opened a map, his finger tracing a perilous stretch of river downstream, an area marked with rapids and hidden dangers. A grim determination settled over him as he formulated his next move. The shadows of the Yukon watched silently, as though sensing the storm to come. Morning broke over the Yukon, pale sunlight filtering through a thick mist that hovered over the river like ghostly fingers. Mike rose first, stretching off the stiffness of sleep, oblivious to the tension that lurked beneath Jason's quiet surface. He brewed coffee, the bitter aroma blending with the fresh scent of pines, bringing a brief moment of peace. Jason sat apart, sipping his coffee, silent, eyes distant, his thoughts tangled in dark contemplation. He watched Mike's easy movements, his quiet laughter as he prepared their gear for the day, unaware of the shadow slowly enveloping their friendship. As the day progressed, the river currents grew stronger, the water murmuring louder beneath their kayaks. The majestic landscape around them, once inviting, now seemed more remote, almost foreboding. The towering trees leaned inward, their branches like gnarled hands stretching towards the river, seeming to warn them, or perhaps beckon them onward. Mike felt unease prickle the edges of his awareness, but he dismissed it as simple wilderness nerves. Jason, however, interpreted the surroundings differently, as confirmation of his plans. Nature itself seemed to whisper approval, the wind rustling through leaves, urging him forward into the darkness within himself. Late afternoon shadows stretched long across the river when Jason suggested they split up briefly to scout ahead for a promising fishing spot. Mike, always trusting, agreed without hesitation, paddling into the path Jason had pointed out, a narrow, winding tributary known locally as the Devil's Throat. It was said that those who entered it rarely came out unscathed, but Jason had conveniently omitted that detail. As Mike paddled further, the river narrowed dramatically, the water roaring around him, waves surging, slamming against his kayak. Panic surged through him as the rapid's intensity grew, rocks looming ominously from the frothing water. With a sickening crunch, the kayak struck submerged stones, pitching Mike into the icy current. He fought desperately against the swirling waters, grasping at roots and rocks, gasping as freezing water burned his lungs. On the shore above, hidden among the dense forest shadows, Jason watched coldly, heart hammering with guilt and excitement. Yet he made no move to help, believing fate was finally handing him the life he'd always envied. Mike's vision blurred as the water took him, the world around him dimming to darkness. But in that final desperate moment, something unseen seemed to grasp him, a whisper of strength, a force that propelled him towards the shore, towards survival. He gasped, breaking the surface, coughing violently as he crawled onto the rocky bank, battered, bruised, but alive. Above him, the vast Yukon sky stared down impassively, aware of the betrayal that had just unfolded. Mike lay shivering on the shore, the bitter cold piercing his soaked clothing, numbing his limbs. Pain radiated from his side where he'd struck the rocks. Yet the physical agony paled in comparison to the realization that had struck deeper. The knowledge that Jason had sent him into that deadly trap. Determined to survive, Mike dragged himself further into the cover of dense forest. Darkness was beginning to claim the wilderness, shadows deepening, shapes becoming indistinct, creating a world where imagination could easily breed fear. He stumbled forward, his breath ragged, each step a battle against exhaustion and pain. Meanwhile, back at the camp, Jason practiced his facade, carefully rehearsing his story. Mike had insisted on scouting alone. He'd warned him it was dangerous, but Mike had laughed it off. He sat near the fire, a haunting guilt occasionally surfacing in his eyes, only to be quickly suppressed by an even darker resolve. As night settled, Jason's guilt began to manifest as paranoia. Every rustle, every distant crackle of twigs seemed to whisper accusations in Mike's voice. Mike found a sheltered hollow beneath the sprawling roots of an ancient tree. Gathering leaves and branches, he managed to create a crude shelter, enough to shield him from the harshness of the Yukon night. Sleep, however, was elusive. His thoughts churned relentlessly, cycling through betrayal, disbelief, and sorrow. He remembered the years he'd shared with Jason, their countless adventures, laughter around the campfire, shared dreams, and whispered fears. Each memory, now tainted, became a dagger to his heart. Then, in the heart of night, something strange occurred. Mike awoke abruptly, certain he'd heard a voice, soft, comforting, yet tinged with sorrow. He strained his ears, hearing nothing but the distant howl of the wind. He dismissed it as exhaustion playing tricks on his mind, yet the feeling of being watched lingered, a comforting yet unnerving presence that he couldn't explain. Back at the campsite, Jason lay sleepless, his paranoia mounting. The firelight cast twisted shadows across the tent canvas, shadows that seemed to dance and contort into accusatory forms. His mind conjured visions of Mike's ghostly figure standing just beyond the fire's reach, silently judging him. Fear settled into Jason's bones, colder than any Yukon wind, as guilt became an almost tangible force, pressing heavily upon his chest. Dawn broke pale and gray over the Yukon wilderness, revealing a land veiled in mist. Mike stirred from an uneasy sleep, his wounds aching and body stiff from the cold. Yet despite everything, a newfound resolve burned inside him. He had survived the night, and now he was determined to make it back to his life, back to Laura. As he gathered his remaining strength, Mike became acutely aware of how silent the forest had become. It was an unnatural quiet, broken only by his heartbeat echoing in his ears. Each step felt heavier, the landscape around him shifting subtly, trees appearing almost identical, paths seeming to loop back on themselves. He felt disoriented, as if something unseen sought to confuse and entrap him deeper into the wilderness. At the same time, Jason awoke at the campfire, bleary-eyed and exhausted from his sleepless night. His first instinct was to inspect the shoreline, half expecting to find Mike's body washed up, finally confirming the twisted hope he secretly harbored. Finding nothing, a surge of anxiety gripped him. Mike could still be alive, could still return to reveal the truth. Mike trudged onward, the weight of betrayal heavier than his injuries. His mind flashed back to Laura, the warmth of her smile, the comfort in her voice, and how fiercely she would fight for him if she knew the truth. Her memory became his beacon, guiding him forward through the deceptive landscape. But the Yukon seemed to be testing him. Shadows flickered at the corners of his vision. Whispers floated just beyond comprehension, making him wonder if his sanity was beginning to fray. Each breath was labored, each movement a testament to sheer willpower. And yet, amidst the disorientation, something intangible was leading him, a subtle presence, a silent whisper, steering him toward hope. Meanwhile, Jason began frantically dismantling their camp, desperate to erase any signs of what truly happened. His hands trembled uncontrollably as guilt transformed into panic. Visions of Mike returning, vengeful and relentless, haunted him with every movement. The surrounding trees felt like silent witnesses, observing and judging his every act. Paranoia clawed at his mind, threatening to unravel his sanity. Hours passed. Mike emerged from the labyrinthine wilderness onto familiar terrain. He saw the distant gleam of water. The river he knew would lead him back to the camp, back to Jason. Determination mixed with apprehension as he moved carefully towards his destination, unsure of what awaited him. Arriving near the campsite, he concealed himself in thick bushes, observing Jason from afar. His friend, once confident and collected, now appeared fragile and jumpy, consumed by guilt. Seeing Jason this way filled Mike with a complicated mix of pity and anger. At that moment, a sudden snapping of twigs nearby caused Mike's heart to stop. Turning quickly, he saw a faint silhouette moving quietly through the trees. He strained to make it out, realizing it wasn't Jason. It was indistinct, almost ethereal, a shimmering figure blending with the shadows. A chill crawled up his spine, both comforting and unsettling. Could this presence be guiding him, or was it simply another illusion? Mike watched Jason pacing, his nervousness palpable even from a distance. He considered confronting Jason directly, yet instinct warned him against impulsivity. He knew he needed evidence, something concrete to bring back home and expose Jason's betrayal. Carefully, he crept closer, using the dense foliage as cover. As darkness once again began to veil the forest, Jason ignited the campfire, flames crackling softly, casting eerie, flickering shadows. Mike watched from the edge of the darkness, feeling a strange, almost supernatural calm envelop him. Then he heard Jason talking, apparently to himself, but the words were unmistakably clear. It was an accident, wasn't it? I didn't mean for it to happen like that. He was my friend, Jason muttered nervously, speaking to the emptiness around him as if seeking absolution from the forest itself. Mike felt his breath hitch. Jason was unraveling, guilt devouring him from within. At that moment, Mike heard again that faint whisper, clearer now, warm and reassuring, as if someone invisible was guiding him toward his next move. Could it be a guardian spirit, or simply his conscience materializing? Unable to bear the tension any longer, Mike stepped out from his hiding place. Jason, he called softly but firmly, the sound echoing in the oppressive silence. Jason spun around, eyes wide in terror. For a moment, he appeared to see a ghost. And Mike, you're alive? He stammered, taking a step back as if seeing an apparition from his worst nightmare. Mike slowly approached, his expression unreadable. Did you really think it would be that easy? Leave me to drown and pretend nothing happened? Jason's face twisted with remorse and fear, stumbling back, nearly falling into the fire. Mike, listen, I didn't mean it, please. The forest around them seemed to tighten, the shadows deepening, pressing closer, as if eagerly observing this final confrontation. Mike saw the truth in Jason's terrified eyes. He was broken, consumed by guilt and fear. Despite everything, Mike found himself pitying the man who had once been his friend. Mike stood over Jason, who had fallen to his knees, overwhelmed by the confrontation. "You betrayed everything we ever had," Mike whispered, his voice steady but filled with quiet anger. "But I won't let your betrayal destroy my life or Laura's." Jason looked up, desperation in his voice. "Mike, forgive me. I was blinded by jealousy, by loneliness. I don't know who I am anymore." Mike felt compassion battling his anger. "You need help, Jason. Real help. But first, you need to answer for what you've done." Suddenly, the ethereal presence Mike had felt earlier manifested clearly behind Jason, a gentle, radiant figure whose features he couldn't quite discern. Jason felt it too, shivering as he turned slightly, sensing someone behind him. "Who's there?" Jason gasped, panic rising again. Mike stared calmly. "Maybe it's someone who's always been watching, waiting for this moment of truth." The presence lingered for a moment, then vanished into the shadows, leaving only silence. Mike reached down to help Jason to his feet, knowing the journey home would be long and arduous, but necessary. Together, in uneasy silence, Mike and Jason began their return journey. Each step through the dense woods seemed heavier than the last, their troubled past echoing around them. The forest was silent, almost respectfully so, as though the very trees understood the gravity of their reconciliation. Jason stumbled often, his guilt manifesting physically as much as emotionally. Mike kept a watchful eye on him, the tension between forgiveness and resentment pulsing through his mind. Yet somewhere deeper within, he knew forgiveness was the only way to heal the wounds left by betrayal. They reached the riverbank, their overturned kayak still wedged between rocks. Mike felt a shiver run through him as memories flooded back. The icy water, the hopeless struggle. Jason glanced at him apologetically, then began silently working to free the vessel, desperate for some form of redemption through action. Mike hesitated, then joined in. Slowly, they worked together, neither speaking, the shared task an unspoken truce, however fragile. After hours of exhausting effort, they finally managed to free the kayak and began paddling downstream. Silence persisted, punctuated only by the rhythmic dip of paddles into the water. Gradually, signs of civilization began to appear along the banks, distant cabins and wooden docks offering hope and relief. As they approached their point of departure, Mike broke the silence. "Jason, what you did, I can't pretend to understand or accept it easily. But I won't let hatred poison me." Jason bowed his head in shame. "I know I've ruined everything, and I know I can't fix it, but thank you for giving me the chance to try." Their kayak touched the familiar shore, marking the end of their harrowing journey. A small crowd gathered, familiar faces etched with relief and confusion. Laura stood among them, tears streaming down her face. Mike stepped on a land and embraced her, holding her tightly as if for the first time, grateful beyond words. As Jason watched from the kayak, a mix of sadness and acceptance washed over him. He had lost everything due to his actions, but perhaps he had finally found himself, broken, yet ready to face whatever consequences awaited him. The forest, dark and mysterious, receded behind them, its shadows carrying away the secrets and pain. And perhaps, somewhere deep within its ancient trees, forgiveness awaited, patient and eternal, as timeless as the wilderness itself.
If you're still here, it means the shadows didn't scare you away. Subscribe to Darkroom Narratives for more stories that linger long after the lights go out.